Welcome to the IonaHoops.com podcast with your host, Guy Flottico.
Yes, it's season 3, episode 6 of the IonaHoops.com podcast. And I know I've been saying it for weeks now that the season is almost here. Well, now it is. Why can I say this now? Because we are going to preview our opening opponents for this in this podcast. Jordan Majewski joined us in this episode to help us preview Iona's games against UPenn and Hofstra. He's a contributor to Mid-Major Madness and also hosts a blog called Staring at the Floorboards. Told you, it was getting real around here now. But now, it's going to get real with my own Iotas.
Iotas.
Iona took on Temple yesterday in a secret scrimmage, and the team split a pair of 20-minute quote-unquote games, in essence, with Temple taking the first by 5 and Iona the second by 4. This was a great test for Iona as Temple enters the season at 92 on KenPom. Iona's at 116. Temple is big and physical, so it was a good experience for Nelly for sure. Word is that Quinn Selzinski and Dennis Jenkins were the two best Gaels yesterday against the Owls. So, a good effort against a likely top 100 team as a final tune-up.
Iotas.
By now, you know that during the Mac Media Day last week, Adam Zagoria took over the friggin' call to stir up trouble by asking Rick Pitino about the state of his lifetime contract with Iona, which has caused most of Gael Nation to fret unnecessarily. But when the conversation turned to hoops, the Hall of Famer settled in with a nice assessment of his roster and schedule.
Well, it's been a lot of fun. We have a terrific group of guys, young in many respects, but we have enough maturity because of the transfer portal that we have good experience. We have obviously Nelly Joseph Jr. back, Walter Clayton Jr. back. We have certainly Barrick in his 5th year, Jean-Louis. So we have good experience. We have a newcomer, Dennis Jenkins, who is a big-time basketball player. I mean, he could have started for me at Louisville. He's big time. And we're excited to have him as well. So we have a good team. We have a lot of young players that will develop in time. We tried to make a very difficult schedule. As you may know, we're probably 5th or 6th toughest non-conference schedule in the nation. But we also limited the month of November. We're playing only, I think, 4 or 5 games in the month of November to give our young guys a chance to develop. The strength of our basketball team is we have 4 terrific backcourt players, and I can't say enough about DJ Dennis Jenkins. He's a 6'3" point guard. He's big time athletically, tremendous basketball player. And then we have 2 7-foot centers. We have 2 6'9" players. So, we have size that you don't see that often in the MAC, and we have a terrific backcourt. If the young guys can improve and blend in with the experience we have, and I say this not as a typical coach who always sounds that way, we've got to get through this non-conference schedule. It's a bear. Every team, like we didn't play just an Ivy League opener. We tried to schedule one of the top 2 or 3 teams in Penn. And then we go back a few weeks later and we played a second-ranked team, Princeton, in a neutral site at Keene State. So if we can get by the schedule and still be optimistic and still not get discouraged with a couple of losses, I think we're going to do very well come MAC time. I think we're going to be a much better defensive team than we were last year. I think we're still going to be a very good offensive basketball team. Like I said, my only trepidation at all, and it's not great, is the schedule. Young people have a tendency to get down, and one thing we're going to have some bumps in the road with that type of schedule.
Although it was Nelly Jr. Joseph earning preseason first-team All-MAC honors and Walter Clayton Jr. second-team honors, it's been Dennis Jenkins that has been the focal point for Pitino this offseason for the Gaels, who were, of course, picked first in the preseason poll. Who was picked second by the coaches, you ask? Manhattan. And as you know by now, all hell has broken loose in Riverdale. Steve Mazziello was fired. MAC preseason player of the year Jose Perez has hit your portal. As a result, so has Hofstra transfer Omar Silviero, so has Samba Diallo, and others are going to follow. So, safe bet the Jaspers won't be finishing second. In fact, feels more like we already have a name for the 6-11 game on Tuesday night in Atlantic City. What a turn of events so close to the start of the season. I don't mean to make light of it. It's terrible for the kids. So hopefully they all find good landing spots, the ones that are leaving.
Iotas.
Consider this entire season the Rich Enzer farewell tour. But make no mistake, he's going to have a hand in future MAC tournament sites. Responding to questions from Siena beat writer Mark Singeles, Enzer noted that the MAC is not locked into the current tourney setup or arrangements.
I think we're going to see not just our traditional type bids where we're taking all 22 teams to one site, but we may have bids from other arenas who want to take a piece of that. And then we'll have to weigh that. You know, what are our goals? What are our student athletes and coaches want? And what's in the best interest for the economics of the league?
When you say that some facilities just want to take a piece of it, what do you mean by that, Rich?
They may just want to take the semifinals and finals. They may want to take, they may want to take 8 teams. All things are going to be on the table for discussion. But ultimately, it's going to be what's in the best interest of all the schools and what they want to do with basketball. I do know this much. It's going to stay a joint tournament. We're not going to split the men and the women. That's been decided.
So is one possibility like playing early rounds of the tournament on home campuses or something, and then playing late?
Yeah, any of that's on the table. There's no preference other than keeping the men and the women together. We've had weigh-ins from the coaches and the players, and I think they kind of like the 22-team format on one site. But we're going to see what comes in the door.
The MAC tourney setup has often been discussed in this pod, on the Iona message board, on the MAC board, on Twitter, so it's safe to say many folks are going to keep an eye on this process as it continues. It'll be interesting to see.
Ionas.
The Iona women's team was picked to finish 5th in the MAC, led by preseason All-MAC first-team selection Juana Camilleon and second-team selection Ketsia Athias. Here's Coach Billy Chambers on her star duo.
I mean, it was obviously exciting to see them picked on first and second team preseason. Watching them lead every day has been so exciting, so comforting as a coach to watch them take everybody under their wing with so many new players that we've added to our roster. They're incredible people. They are hardworking. They love the game. They really have an ultimate respect for each other. Which makes it fun to see develop. Sometimes you can have, your best players who don't quite gel as much as you want them to do, but you just see them working in tandem every day, calling timeouts in practice, communicating with each other, trying to figure out how to make sure that we can be at our best every moment. And it's just really fun to sit back and watch them grow and watch them lead.
Here's hoping the Lady Gaels exceed those solid preseason expectations this season. And now, the offer roundup.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
Iona has offered class of 2023 forward Marcus Marian out of Denmark. The 6'9" forward also has offers from Dayton, GW, San Jose State, and Montana State thus far. If you look for some highlight clips of him, it's going to show him to be a pretty fluid athlete out there. He can score in a whole variety of ways. He runs the floor really well. Intriguing recruit. Let's see who else gets involved with him this fall. All right, let's get into our preview segment of this episode as I take a look at the season openers at home against UPenn on Tuesday, November 7th, and at Hofstra 4 days later, Saturday, November 11th. Well, we've been hearing all off season that Pitino put together a brutal non-conference slate, and now it's here. And we're going to start things off at home against Ivy League favorite Penn. If you don't know the name Jordan Dingle, you should. The 6'3" junior guard is a candidate for Player of the Year in the conference, averaged 21 points per game last year. Dingle shot 34% from three and 81% from the line, so he's one of those guys that scores in multiple ways. His backcourt mate is no slouch either. Clark Slackjert averaged about 11 per game last year. In their front court, Penn's top 3 rebounders from a year ago all return, led by Max Martz, who averaged 10 and 5 and also was third on the team in threes made, hitting there at 36%. The Quakers have a few other rotational guys returning as well, so there's good experience on this roster. Anyway, no question Penn was a solid offensive team last year, 111th in Ken Palm offensive efficiency. But for comparison, Iona was 80th. but Penn could even be better this year. The Quakers were not very good on defensive end a year ago, 295th per KenPom, but they were also missing 6'9" shot blocker Max Lorca-Lloyd for most of the season due to injury, and his return should make them a little more efficient on that end of the floor. Penn's outlook this season will likely depend on how much it improves on the defensive side of the ball, but they have the pieces to be a real problem here for the Gaels on opening night. Turning to our second game, we now switch to our local rival, Hofstra. Predicted by many to be in the thick of the CAA race this year, the Pride feature yet another player of the year in his league, but one we know a little better, Aaron Estrada. You'll all remember Estrada for St. Peter's in the past and Hofstra last year. Yep, he's back. 18.5 points, 5.7 boards, 5 assists a game. Just a great weapon for the Pride. Player in the year in CAA last year, of course, the favorite to repeat. We had a fun game with Speedy Claxton's boys at home last year, if you remember, and now we head to their place in a true non-conference road game. Not many of these on the slate. Anyway, Estrada is joined by 6'8" sophomore forward Darlingston Dubar, who averaged 12 and 5 last year for the Pride. Another couple interesting pieces to watch for Hofstra. How about Tyler Thomas, a transfer from Sacred Heart, who averaged 17 points per game last year? Sounds like a dangerous backcourt mate for Estrada. And you want a familiar name you can watch? Warren Williams. Yes, that Warren Williams from Manhattan. Jokes aside, because he transferred in time. Joins the Pride's front court, which is on the thin side after Dubar. So even with the losses to graduation, Hofstra's offensive efficiency probably shouldn't change much from the 72nd KenPom rating it had a year ago. But like Penn, can the Pride improve on the other end of the floor where they were just 218th nationally in defensive efficiency? So this game will feel a little bit like the Penn game in that regard, but this is a true road game. And, well, Iona wasn't a great team in true road games last year. So this will be a nice but very difficult test to start things off on the road for the Gaels non-conference. That's my look at those two teams in our two opening games. But now let's welcome Jordan Majewski to the program to get his take. Jordan Majewski is a contributor to Mid-Major Madness and also hosts a blog called Staring at the Floorboards. He's been really busy the past couple of months, turning out a ton of college hoop previews. And he joins us now to preview Iona's first two opponents. Jordan, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So let's start off with your take on our Iona Gaels here. I'll set the table for you here. Like everyone else in the universe, you picked Iona first. So tell us why.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with Rick Pitino, and I'm a huge Pitino fan. Maybe not so much, personal life, but like on the court, he's as good as it gets in my book. But a lot of it does hinge on some of the new faces, as I'm sure you're well aware. Namely, Jenkins, I think, is the key to the season. Obviously, if he can be as good as Pitino thinks he's going to be, there's not a lot in his past to go on to think he's going to be a, max superstar, but I have faith that he will. And, a guy like Slazinski really putting it all together this year in a more central role, I'd say, are probably the two keys in my book for Iona to stay atop the league.
All right. One thing I noticed in your preview, there's one Gael that maybe you're not quite as high on as some others out there in media, and that's Walter Clayton. You pointed to his erratic minutes, and it's a fair point, but he was a freshman. Are you feeling a sophomore jump, or you're just not a big believer in it?
Oh, no, I think that I do believe in Clayton. It's just I probably caught some, I didn't see every minute of Iona basketball like you did, of course, and just what I saw, I didn't come away terribly impressed with. But as you said, he's a freshman. It's, hard to kind of get in the flow with the minutes he saw and, build confidence and things like that. So, full summer workout and everything like that, I'm sure I'm undervaluing him as the season begins.
So there is one thing that you and I do see eye to eye on, and I think a good number of people, even Iona fans, I think to some of them anyway, might disagree with me on lots of folks on the Nelly Jr. Joseph bandwagon, and rightfully so, as an all-around player, but many are starting to sing his praises on the defensive end because of his block rate, and actually name him as a candidate for defensive player in the year in the MAC. Heck, in my mind, he's not even the best defensive player on Iona. That's Barrick Jean-Louis. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think Jean-Louis is easily the best defensive player on the team. I think he and Patino kind of, maybe you would know better than I, don't see eye to eye a lot of the times just because of his minutes fluctuation.
Yes.
But the defense is his raw numbers, and like his rates are, great, but I think that he is exploitable in the post.
Yeah, and people who've been listening to me for a while are probably sick of me talking about, I think one of the reasons why Iona kind of fell apart down the stretch last year is that Walter Clayton started to take a lot of Barrick's minutes, and that kind of changed the dynamic and who we are. So yeah, I agree. I mean, Nelly can block shots, of course, there's no doubt about that, but and maybe it's just a product that he was a freshman last year, but he wasn't great at establishing a position, wasn't so great at keeping other bigs from setting up camp too close to the basket. Maybe another off season working with Coach Patino, maybe he improves on some of that, and maybe he is a better defensive player than either one of us are giving him credit for, and I hope it's the case. But yeah, right. Some of the people who are pegging him as defensive player of the year I think it's a little much.
Yeah, what you said is exactly my point, that there's a difference between rim protection and altering shots and being a good positional defender. Yeah. And I think that he's not a good positional defender right now, certainly capable of that. But, what I saw, I didn't think he was a very good positional defender.
Yeah. Okay. And one of your bigger concerns, and I think and probably most other Iona fans would say this is a determining factor. Can the Gaels shoot the three better than they did a year ago? I don't know. Time's going to tell. Iona was a good team anyway, and offensively efficient last year, even though they couldn't make threes last year. Was that a fluke, or can they get away with it again?
I think in this league, they can get away with it. Again, but you would obviously love to be able to hit the three, and especially per shot quality, they created open threes at the second highest rate in the league. So it's not an issue of like guys are taking bad shots necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Right.
In fact, they had the highest shot selection rating as well per shot quality. So it's just a matter of making these open shots, which is probably the most frustrating thing of all, because they're creating the shots. You just have to hit them, Right. So that does give you some hope that, it's not some sort of like program endemic thing where they're not able to create good shots, or it's a bunch of guys jacking up terrible shots. The shots are there. Good shot selection is there. Just got to hit them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's shift gears now that we've gotten that out of the way. Let's talk a little bit about Iona's first opponent, which is UPenn. Game is in New Rochelle. First night of the season for everybody. So earlier in this episode, I kind of introduced Gael Nation to Jordan Dingle. It's a safe bet. You have seen him a bit more than any of us. I think I've seen him play maybe once. So tell us about his game, and tell Iona fans what we can watch for him.
Yeah, he led the Ivy in usage and shot rate last year. And he's, if you don't know much about Steve Donahue's offense, it's a very free-flowing motion. They use a lot of different screens, a lot of people coming off screens, but Dingle's a different type of player because he can create off the dribble. So their offense kind of shifted last year with Dingle being so much a focal point. So it's not like the Donahue way is he was well before his time in terms of every shot coming at the rim or a three. And so last year it was a little different because Dingle is such a dribble drive centric guard, which isn't really a fit in the Donahue offense, but he's just such a dynamic offensive player that I think, Steve kind of recognized. I kind of got to let this guy do his thing. Now, Iona potentially lucked out here. Dingle sat out their exhibition game a couple days ago and was in a protective boot. And Donahue's post-game comments, from what I read, I would say he's doubtful to play against Iona. Yeah, he said it was a really vague statement, but he said that it's a foot problem. It could be serious or it could not be serious. But I would the way he said it just seemed to me like it's, something they're not going to risk with, everything riding on the Ivy League season, regular season. And the Ivies are notoriously tight-lipped with their injuries. It's impossible to find out anything extensive about anyone. And Penn had a ton of injuries last year, and no one ever knew if any of their front court was coming back last year. So Iona will probably play Penn without Jordan Dingle, and will play Vermont without Dylan Penn.
That's right.
So nice little injury luck for the Gaels to start the year.
Yeah. So obviously Penn was picked first in the Ivy pretty much by everybody, or at least a lot of consensus generally. Obviously Dingle by himself isn't enough to do that. So especially with him perhaps not playing, who should we watch for?
So another one of their top scorers, Clark Slatcher, also didn't play in that exhibition game, and no word was given on his status. But they went with a huge lineup. So last year, Penn's big problem was their entire front court was injured almost the entire year, namely Max Lorca-Lloyd, who is the key to their season. Like Dingle is their star, but Lorca-Lloyd is an above the rim big who has had just a ton of injuries his entire career at Penn and has rarely seen the floor, but he's a difference maker. Extremely athletic. They don't have a ton of bigs like that. A lot of bigs in the Ivies are kind of high post bigs or guys who, can kind of space out on the perimeter. But Lorca-Lloyd is a legit athlete. So they've got a healthy front court at least. And in that exhibition game, Donahue started a huge lineup where their point guard was Lucas Monroe, who goes 6'6", and so he was their smallest guy on the floor. So if that's what he's going to roll out against Iona, that's a really big lineup. And Iona's backcourt is projected to be kind of small this year, so that's something to look at. And I would say their closest comparison to a MAC school is Quinnipiac, the way they run their offense. But again, there's, it's just a lot of motion, a lot of high-low motion as well with the bigs passing to each other. So Penn's offense could be totally different from what we saw last year, especially if Dingle is not playing and Donahue has his front court intact.
Yeah, and I know Penn's biggest issue last year, like you said, was the injuries they had in the front court, which really hindered them on defense. It looks like, in your mind, if they do stay healthy and like Dingle comes back, everybody's back, can they be a good defensive team, or you think they top out at average? Where can they be?
It's kind of weird. There's not a lot of pick and roll in the Ivy League, and so if he's going to have this big lineup, it can be really not something that a lot of Ivy teams are going to exploit. So I think they will certainly be improved defensively from last year and potentially significantly so.
Okay. All right. I think we can switch over to someone that Iona fans do know a little bit better, and that's Hofstra. I say that even though their rosters had a ton of turnover, but they do return a big time weapon we do know well around here, Aaron Estrada. So he starts at St. Peter's, goes there as a freshman, goes to Oregon, doesn't do much, now settles in at Hempstead. In your mind, as somebody he's developed over the years, how has his game evolved in your mind? What's made him into the player he is?
Yeah, just with a steady and secure role, he exploded last year. Led the Colonial and much like Dingle, led him in shot and usage rates, was second in assist rate, a master manipulator in ball screens, and that's Hofstra's game. They had a top 25 pick and roll rate nationally. They have typically 4 guards who can take a ball screen. They had to replace some guys, but they brought in guys like Tyler Thomas from Sacred Heart, who came from a similar system, running a ton of ball screens and pick and roll there. I don't know what their plan is for a guy like Juan Carlos. I think they're probably going to start him on the ball more and kind of move Estrada off a little bit. And then their 4 guy, Darlington Dubar, is perfect in that system. And a lot of people who follow the CAA closely think he's going to have a monster season as a pick and pop 4 and someone who can create his own shot at the 4 as well. So he's a real matchup problem for a lot of mid-majors and CAA teams. Last year, as is the case, they kind of aren't that good in the front court, but they've got another friend of Iona transferring in this year with Warren Williams coming in from Manhattan. Kind of got out of there before everybody else did.
That's true.
So he, you obviously know what Williams brings to the table. So, he's a more than serviceable big, of course, in both ends of the court. So that's a pretty big, significant pickup for them to slot him at the 5 with 4 out around him. They were a top 40, top 30-ish team, actually, in shot quality matrix and spacing and shot making. So, they can fill it up. And the guy who kind of burned Iona and made that game closer than it probably should have been last year is gone, though. I think Ray hit like 6 or 7 threes in that game.
Yep. He was unguardable.
Yeah. So, they did their thing in pick and roll. They had their pick and roll rate that game was actually higher than their season long average. So, this is there's only one Barrick John Luis. So, and they have 4 perimeter players. So Iona's going to have everybody on the perimeter locking down somebody. But, that's about Hofstra should contend at the top of the CAA. Everyone pretty much has Towson slotted in as the team to beat there.
Yeah.
But Hofstra is a pretty consensus top 2, top 3 pick.
Yeah. So, and so, we talked about how good Hofstra is offensively, over offensive efficiency, 72nd. We know they space things out. Like you said, they find great ways to get looks from 3. Thankfully, it's one of Iona's strengths to deny the 3. So that'll be fun to watch. But with the new faces in the mix, do you expect the Pride to maybe not quite be as good on the offensive end, or is Estrada that good where it may not matter?
I think Estrada is that good where it may not matter. And, this guy, Thomas is a proven scorer, in a lesser league than the MAC and the NEC. But Jaquan Carlos is a guy to watch. He had multiple 90-point games in high school. So he's been sitting on the bench biding his time, but he's a legit scorer. So, Estrada, Thomas, Carlos, I don't think they're going to, and then DeBar at the 4, I don't think they're losing much of anything offensively. And one of the guys they did lose, Zach Cooks, was kind of a, hindrance more than it's a little bit of a addition by subtraction with him gone. Not defensively, though. Yeah. He was an elite on-ball defender. And that's, I don't think this team is any better defensively than they were last year.
That was my next question for you.
Yeah, Iona really torched them at the rim last year in that game. I think they scored 1.3 points per possession at the rim last year in that game. So, in Hofstra, they were so bad in man-to-man, they went to zone. They had the highest zone rate in the Colonial. They didn't actually play any zone when I look back at the synergy stats, synergy box score from that game. But it was so early in the year, I don't think Claxton knew just how bad his team was in man-to-man yet. So he wasn't willing to, throw the zone out that early when they probably hadn't been, running it through practice that much.
Well, see, on paper, I feel good about the game, but it's a true road game for us. And we don't really play a lot of those non-conference under Pitino. It's a lot of neutral site stuff. So I'm a little worried about it from that perspective, just the performance on the road, especially against somebody who's going to be amped to take out a local rival. So that'll be fun. Hey, Jordan, thank you for coming on to help us preview Iona's 2 opening games. Everyone, please follow him at JorCubsDan on Twitter. And you can read all his previews at staringatthefloorboards.wordpress.com. He's pretty much previewing every conference, I assume, right? Is that what you're doing?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, nonstop. Jordan, thanks again and enjoy the season, which finally is here for all of us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, enjoy. Actual games. So exciting. Thanks again to Jordan Majewski for getting us ready for our openers. The adventure begins, people, and I promise it won't be boring. We'll see you on the other side in the next episode. Thanks for listening, and go Gaels.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the IonaHoops.com podcast. This podcast is a production of IonaHoops.com with publisher Guy Filatico. The opinions shared during this podcast are those of Guy Filatico, IonaHoops.com, and any featured guests. This podcast is not affiliated with Iona University Athletics or the university itself. Thank you for supporting IonaHoops.com.